If you aren't here for our money, signing this should be effortless. Sign it, gold digger!
The champagne stopped pouring, and at 8:52 p.m., 68 guests filled the Halstead Crown Club watching Camille Monroe sit beside the man she was supposed to marry in 36 hours. She wore a burgundy gown cut clean across the shoulders, elegant enough to make half the room stare, and restrained enough to make Regina Harrington dismiss it as trying too hard. Then the family attorney approached. He placed a leather folder in front of Camille. Regina slid it across the white tablecloth. Sign it. Camille opened the document. Prenuptial agreement. Her eyes moved once to Darius. He looked down. Regina's smile barely changed. If you aren't marrying my son for what the Harrington name provides, signing this should be effortless. Brielle lifted her wineglass. Mom, just say it. Everyone here is thinking it anyway. Regina leaned back. Fine. Sign it, gold digger? The room froze. A waiter stood behind Camille with a champagne bottle still tilted above an empty glass. Someone near the piano stopped breathing loudly enough to be heard. Camille looked at Darius again. Nothing. 2 tables away, Kang Tae-jun set down his drink. The Harringtons wanted $8.7 million from him, yet tonight they were accusing someone else of wanting their money. Camille turned a page, then another. She picked up the pen. Every face leaned closer. They thought humiliation had won. They were wrong. Before we go back 4 months, tell me where you're watching from, and subscribe, because what Camille does with that pen changes everything. 4 months earlier, Camille Monroe was standing barefoot in the stockroom of her flagship boutique, with a pin between her lips and a 58-year-old customer trying not to cry. The woman's name was Evelyn Price-Hott. She had come in for a Navy interview suit after spending 11 years caring for her husband through Parkinson's disease. He had died the previous spring. Her savings had thinned. Her confidence had gone with them. I look ridiculous, Evelyn whispered, staring at herself in the mirror. Camille removed the pin from her mouth. No, the jacket is wrong. Evelyn blinked. Camille stepped behind her and adjusted the shoulders, then pulled the fabric inward at the waist. Clothes are supposed to work for you, not punish you for having a body. Evelyn looked at herself again. Something changed. Not dramatically, just enough that her shoulders moved back. Camille smiled. That was the moment she still loved most. Not the sales numbers, not the magazine features, not the photographs of celebrities, leaving Monroe with garment bags over their arms. That moment, a woman looking in the mirror and remembering she belonged in the room she was about to enter. Camille had learned that from Ruth Monroe. Ruth had raised her in a narrow brick house on Chicago's South Side, 2 blocks from the little tailoring shop where she spent more waking hours than she did at home. The shop had 1 front window, 3 sewing machines, a fitting platform that leaned slightly to the left, and a bell above the door that rang too loudly in winter. Camille grew up beneath cutting tables. By 13, she understood that a 1/4 inch at the shoulder could change the way a woman carried herself. Ruth treated fashion like dignity. A good dress doesn't make a woman valuable. She told Camille one Saturday while hemming a church suit. It reminds her she already is. Camille remembered the woman wearing that suit. Mrs. Delaney, 63, recently divorced, first date in 38 years. She had walked into the fitting room looking apologetic. She walked out laughing. Camille never forgot. Ruth died when Camille was 23, a stroke. The tailor shop passed to Camille with $12,000 in unpaid invoices, an old Singer machine, a 6-month commercial lease, and a pair of dressmaking scissors Ruth had owned longer than Camille had been alive. Everyone told Camille to close. She did the opposite. She repainted the shop herself. She learned bookkeeping at night. She took alterations during the day and designed simple work dresses after midnight. Her first original collection was 12 pieces, hung on a brass rail beside the fitting rooms. She sold 9 in 1 weekend, then 18 the next month. Then a buyer from a small Gold Coast boutique ordered 37. 12 years later, Monroe had 9 stores, 86 employees, annual revenue of $14.73 million, an independent valuation of $24.8 million. Camille owned 74%, and yet most people meeting her outside the fashion industry would never know any of that. Money was useful. It was not identity, at least. That was what Camille told herself. She had learned early that success changed the way people looked at her. One ex-boyfriend loved her until he saw the company valuation. After that, every disagreement ended with him asking whether her money made her feel superior. It did not, but the accusation stayed. So Camille learned to edit. When people asked how business was doing, she said, "We're growing." When they asked how many locations she had, she sometimes said, "A few." When they called her boutique charming, she smiled. It was easier. Then she met Darius Harrington. The first time he spoke to her, he did not ask what she did. They were standing beneath a painting at the Du Sable Black Arts Benefit, both holding untouched champagne, while a donor nearby explained loudly why a modern piece needed more color. Darius leaned slightly toward Camille. "I think he means he needs the painting to explain itself to him." Camille almost laughed into her glass. That would ruin the experience. Exactly. They spent 43 minutes discussing the exhibition. Only afterward did he ask her name. Not her job, not her family, not what she owned. For Camille, that mattered. Darius was thoughtful, educated, gentle in private. He ran the Harrington Cultural Foundation, an institution that funded youth arts programs and preservation work throughout Chicago. He remembered details. He knew Ruth's favorite gospel song because Camille had mentioned it once. When she worked late, Darius brought dinner without asking when she would be finished. For nearly 2 years, he made her feel as though love could be quiet. Then he proposed in the closed courtyard behind the museum where they had met. Just Darius, Camille, winter lights and bare trees, and one question. She said yes before he finished asking. The first Harrington dinner after the engagement should have warned her. Regina Harrington lived in a limestone mansion in Bronzeville that looked less like a home than a family argument preserved in architecture. Portraits of doctors, judges, and a state senator lined the main staircase. Dinner was served at 8. Brielle Harrington arrived at 8:23, wearing a cream silk blouse and a smile that made Camille like her immediately. "My future sister." She hugged Camille before Camille had decided whether they were hugging people. That first night, Brielle was warm and curious. She asked about Monroe and gasped when Camille mentioned she designed parts of each collection. "You have to help me. I own clothes, but I don't understand clothes." Camille laughed. 3 days later, Brielle came to the flagship store. Camille fitted her into an unreleased ivory blazer. Brielle stared at herself in the mirror. "This is dangerous." "What is?" "I suddenly believe I deserve a board seat." "You already have one." "See? Dangerous." Camille gave her the blazer. Brielle protested for almost 30 seconds, then accepted it. A week later, a photograph from a foundation luncheon appeared online. Brielle was wearing the blazer. A friend commented asking who designed it. Brielle replied, "Something Camille found for me." Camille noticed. She told herself not to. Regina was harder to ignore. Her disapproval never arrived naked. It wore pearls. At brunch, she smiled over coffee and said, "Your boutiques are charming, Camille." At dinner, she asked whether managing retail girls became exhausting. At a museum reception, she introduced Camille to another donor by saying she built her business herself. No family connections at all. The words sounded complimentary. The tone did not. Still, she kept quiet. Darius had warned her Regina needed time. "My mother has always been protective." "Protective of you?" "Of the family." Camille looked at him. "What does she think I'm going to do to it?" Darius smiled as though the question were too serious. "Nothing, that's my point. Just let her get used to you. Just let her." The phrase appeared again 2 weeks later. Regina criticized the guest list for the wedding because Camille wanted to invite several longtime employees. This isn't a company picnic. Camille's jaw tightened. Darius touched her knee beneath the table. Let it go. Then again, when Brielle borrowed 3 Monroe pieces for a charity shoot and credited every vendor except Camille. She probably forgot. Camille stared at him. She tagged the florist. Darius sighed. Camille. There it was, not anger. Fatigue, as if the problem were not what had happened, but that Camille had noticed. She let it go. That became her mistake. One Thursday night, Regina hosted 12 people for dinner at the Harrington house. Camille arrived late from a fitting and paused outside the dining room when she heard her own name. Regina's voice floated through the doorway. Darius has always liked ambitious women. I only hope ambition isn't what she loves most about our name. A woman laughed softly. Darius was in the room. Camille knew because she could see his reflection in the dark window. He had heard every word. For 3 long seconds, he said nothing. Then, Mom, Regina answered lightly. What? I'm complimenting her. Darius exhaled. Can we not do this tonight? Not, that's unfair. Not, don't speak about Camille that way. Just, can we not do this tonight? Camille stepped backward before anyone saw her. A minute later, she entered through the front hall and let the family believe she had heard nothing. Darius kissed her cheek. You okay? Camille looked at the man she was going to marry. She thought about Ruth, about women standing straighter in mirrors, about how strange it was that Camille could teach confidence all day and misplace her own by dinner. I'm fine, she said, and because Darius wanted that answer, he believed her. What Camille did not know was that 23 miles away, Regina Harrington was already becoming the least dangerous part of the problem. The Harrington name was running out of money, and Regina had just found the man she believed could save it. The Harrington family did not look like people running out of money. That was the genius of old wealth. The house still had staff. The silver still shone. Regina still hosted charity dinners beneath old chandeliers. Brielle still arrived in designer coats. Nothing looked broken. Numbers disagreed. At 9:10 on a Monday morning, Charles Harrington sat inside a private conference room at Wells and Mercer Bank, staring at a refinancing schedule that had been printed twice because Regina disliked the paper quality of the first copy. Their redevelopment project in West Loop had missed projections for 4 consecutive quarters. A commercial property in River North had lost its anchor tenant. The family trust had already liquidated 2 art holdings to cover operating expenses no one outside the family was supposed to know existed, and a loan facility totaling $11.2 million would mature in 93 days. They did not need all of it, but they needed $8.7 million in new liquidity to restructure the rest. Charles rubbed his forehead. Regina did not look worried. What are our options? The banker cleared his throat. Sell the Lake Geneva property. No. Reduce foundation commitments. No. Bring in an outside investor. Regina looked up. Who? The banker hesitated before sliding a page across the table. One name topped the page. Kang Meridian Capital and Properties. Charles leaned back. Regina read the number beneath it. Then she read it again. Pang. Kang Meridian had the capital, the real estate portfolio, and the appetite for distressed holdings to solve the Harrington problem without forcing a public sale. Charles looked uncomfortable. He's not exactly our usual circle. Regina's eyes stayed on the page. Money has no social circle when you need it. Charles gave her a look. She ignored him. By the end of the week, Kang Taejun had received an invitation to dinner. He knew why before he opened it. Men like Charles Harrington always used heavy paper when they wanted money. Taejun was 37, Korean, disciplined, and difficult to surprise. Publicly, he ran Kang Meridian, with commercial buildings, hotels, logistics assets, and private investments across Chicago and New York. Privately, his name carried another kind of weight. There were dock supervisors who returned his calls before they returned their wives. There were men with criminal histories who crossed the street rather than risk being remembered by him. He did not advertise any of that. Power that needed explanation was usually weak. That Thursday, Tae-jun arrived at the Harrington residence at 7:31 p.m. His driver remained outside. Charles met him in the foyer. Alec. Regina appeared 6 seconds later. Brielle appeared 23 seconds after that. Tae-jun noticed. He noticed most things. Brielle wore a black silk dress, diamond studs, and the expression of a woman who had been told exactly when to enter. Mr. Kang, Regina said warmly. You've met my daughter, Brielle. Once. Brielle smiled. At the museum board. Dinner? I remember. Nothing followed. Dinner was polished. Business waited until dessert. Charles called the West Loop project temporarily underperforming. Tae-jun called it what it was, over-leveraged. Silence followed. Regina smoothly changed the subject to foundations and cultural partnerships. No one mentioned $8.7 million allowed. Tae-jun left knowing exactly how much they needed. Regina watched his car disappear. Then she looked at Brielle. He listened when you spoke. Brielle crossed her arms. He listened when everyone spoke. You're being difficult. I'm being accurate. Regina turned toward her. Accuracy is useful, so is timing. Brielle knew that tone. She had known it since she was 12. Regina carries the name. Darius carries the name. You protect it. Regina had first said it, after Brielle complained that Darius was allowed to skip a family fundraiser for a college trip while Brielle had to stay. At 16, it meant smiling through donor dinners. At 22, ending a relationship Regina disliked. At 31, it meant understanding why Tae-jun had been seated beside her. Brielle looked toward the dark window. Do you want me to marry him? Regina did not answer immediately. That is a childish way to ask the question. It's a very clear way. I want you to get to know him. And if I don't like him? Regina's face barely changed. Then learn enough to decide intelligently. That was not an answer either. Brielle heard it anyway. Over the next 5 weeks, Tae-jun appeared at a foundation luncheon, a museum viewing, a Lake Geneva fundraiser, and a private dinner. Each invitation looked innocent alone. Together, they formed a pattern. At Lake Geneva, Regina arranged the cars so Brielle and Tae-jun would ride together. Brielle noticed. So did Tae-jun. Halfway through the drive, Brielle sighed. My mother thinks subtlety is something other people fail at. Tae-jun looked out the window. That sounds accurate. Brielle laughed despite herself. For the first time, the conversation became real. She told him she hated donor dinners where no one ate. He said he hated people who used charity as photography. She asked if he enjoyed making everyone nervous. No. You do. That is different. She studied him. Most men wanted the Harrington name. Tae-jun treated it like another surname. That unsettled Brielle. It also attracted her. By the time they reached Lake Geneva, Brielle had stopped pretending the arrangement was entirely her mother's idea. 2 weeks later, Camille met Tae-jun. The occasion was the Black Arts Restoration Gala at the Bellwether Museum. Camille arrived with Darius in an emerald Monroe gown, elegant without trying to announce itself. Regina saw them enter. Her smile tightened for half a second, then returned. Tae-jun, she said later, drawing Camille and Darius toward a small group near the sculpture hall. You know my son? Darius shook his hand. Of course. And this is Camille Monroe, Darius's fiancée. She owns a few fashion shops. A few. Camille heard it. She let it pass. Tae-jun looked at her. Monroe? Yes. Something small changed behind his eyes. Camille noticed hesitation for a living. Have we met? She asked. No. The answer came too quickly. They both knew it. But before Camille could press, a woman behind them made a soft, frustrated sound. She was in her late 60s, elegant, silver-haired, and trying discreetly to reach the zipper at the back of her gown. The zipper had separated. Camille excused herself immediately. Mrs. Bell, come with me. The woman flushed. I'm going to have to leave. No, you're not. Camille guided her toward a quiet side corridor. She opened her clutch. Inside were safety pins, fashion tape, and a miniature sewing kit. 5 minutes later, she had stabilized the zipper and hidden the repair beneath a fold. Mrs. Bell looked into the glass of a framed painting. You saved my evening? Camille smiled. No, I saved a zipper. When she returned to the gala floor, Taejun was still where she had left him. He had watched the entire thing, not the repair. Her. Something about the scene had opened a door he had not touched in years. Chicago. 12 years earlier, a narrow boutique with a brass bell above the entrance. His mother, Kang Mi-suk, standing before a mirror in a charcoal suit she insisted cost too much. A young black woman kneeling at her sleeve with pins between her lips. Taejun had been 25 then. Angrier, poorer in ways that had nothing to do with money. His mother had been preparing to speak at a Korean-American women's charity dinner. She kept pulling at the sleeve. "It's too long," she said. The young woman smiled. "I can fix it." She did. When Taejun asked the cost, the young woman shook her head. "Tell your mother she looks beautiful. That's enough." 11 weeks later, Mi-suk was dead. The photograph from that charity dinner became the last photograph Taejun ever took with her. He still had it. Sit. His mother wore the charcoal suit. Inside the jacket, stitched in small letters, was one word. Monroe back at the gala, Taejun looked at Camille again. 35 now. Different hair, different face, but the hands were the same. Careful. Certain, kind without performing kindness. He still was not sure, so he did not ask. Across the room, Brielle watched him, watching Camille. Her smile remained perfect. Her fingers tightened around the stem of her glass. Later, as the quartet began another song, Regina moved beside her. "Stand up straight." Brielle did. Regina adjusted one strand of her hair. "Taejun will be at dinner Thursday." Brielle kept her eyes on Camille. "He seems interested in someone else." Regina followed her gaze. Camille was laughing softly at something Darius had said. Taejun was no longer looking at her, but Brielle had seen enough. "No," Regina said. Brielle turned. Her mother's voice was calm. "Certain?" He simply noticed her. Brielle looked back across the room. For the first time in her life, she understood how much worse it could feel to be noticed less than someone else. What she did not understand yet was why, and that question would make her dangerous. Balak. 3 weeks before the wedding, Darius arrived at Camille's apartment carrying a leather folder. It was the face he wore whenever the problem already belonged to his mother. Camille was standing at the kitchen island with 2 fabric swatches under the pendant light, comparing the fall collection's new wool blend against a supplier sample. She looked up once, saw the folder, and set both pieces aside. "What happened?" "Nothing happened. That folder says otherwise." Darius exhaled and placed it on the counter. "My mother's attorney finished the prenup." Camille looked at him for a moment. Then she nodded. "Good." That was not the answer he expected. "You're okay with it?" "Of course I'm okay with it. You have family assets. I have a company. A prenup makes sense." Relief softened his shoulders. Then Camille opened the folder. She read the first page, then the second, then the third. Her expression changed. Darius noticed. "What?" Camille did not answer. She kept reading carefully. The language was polished. Technical, deliberately dull in the way expensive legal documents often were, when the people drafting them hoped fatigue would do part of the negotiating. Separate property remained separate. Inherited Harrington assets remained protected. Camille had no objection. Then she reached Clause 12, active appreciation. Any measurable increase in the value of a separately owned business during the marriage could be evaluated for marital contribution if the non-owning spouse provided direct or indirect support related to strategy, access, introductions, reputation, or household contribution. Camille read it twice. Then, a third time, "What is this?" Darius leaned over. "I don't know. Standard language?" "No. You're not a lawyer." "No, but I've signed enough acquisition documents to know when a sentence has teeth." She pointed to the paragraph. "This says that if Monroe grows during our marriage, someone can argue you contributed to that growth." "I would never do that." Camille looked at him. "That isn't what I asked." Silence. Darius rubbed the back of his neck. "My mother's lawyers wrote it. We can ask them." "We will." The next morning, Camille sent the document to Naomi Ellis, the attorney who had represented Monroe through 2 lease disputes, 1 licensing conflict, and a minority shareholder buyout. Naomi called her 47 minutes later. "Do not sign this?" Camille leaned back in her office chair. That bad? Not criminal. Not absurd. Worse, sophisticated. Naomi walked her through the problem. The agreement was not trying to seize anything Camille owned today. It was positioning the Harrington side to make future claims if Monroe increased significantly during the marriage, and if Darius became involved, even indirectly, in business introductions, social access, partnerships, or brand expansion. Naomi summarized it in 1 sentence. They aren't asking for what you own today. They're positioning themselves to claim part of what Monroe becomes tomorrow. Camille went very still. Outside her office, 2 assistants were debating garment bags for a New York shipment. Inside, all she could hear was that sentence. What do you recommend? Full reciprocal financial disclosure. Independent counsel on both sides. Rewrite the appreciation clause. Clean definitions, no ambiguity. Do it. Naomi paused. You didn't hesitate. Why would I? Because most people in love start negotiating against themselves before the other side even asks. Camille looked at Ruth's old scissors on the shelf. I've done enough of that already. By Friday, Camille had provided everything. Corporate valuation, ownership structure, real estate interests, investment accounts, liabilities, tax summaries, no games, no hidden accounts, no convenient omissions. Then the Harrington disclosures arrived. Camille read them at 10:14 that night. They were thin, too thin. Several family-held properties were listed using valuations more than 5 years old. Trust obligations were summarized instead of itemized. A commercial loan appeared under a broad liability category, without a current balance. 2 entities she had heard Charles mention at dinner did not appear at all. Camille sent 1 message to Darius. Can you come over? He arrived 28 minutes later. She had the disclosure laid out across the kitchen table. What is Harrington River North Holdings? Darius glanced down. One of Dad's buildings. Debt? I don't know. Who does? Mom's lawyers handle that. Camille looked up. You're 37, the sentence landed harder than she intended. Darius stiffened. It means we're 3 weeks from getting married, and your answer to a question about your own family's finances is that your mother's lawyers handle it. I don't run the trust. I'm not asking whether you run it. I'm asking whether you understand what you're asking me to marry into. Darius pushed back from the table. You're making this sound sinister. I'm making it sound incomplete. My family has managed these assets for generations, and yet your mother wants extraordinary transparency from me while giving me summary pages from you. Darius's jaw tightened. Camille, this is exactly what I didn't want. She stared at him. What? A fight over money? She almost laughed. Then why did your family send me a prenup designed around my company? He did not answer. That night, Darius left before midnight. For the first time since their engagement, he did not kiss her goodbye. 2 days later, Regina called. Not Darius. Regina. Camille, I understand there are concerns. There are clauses my attorney wants revised. Marriage requires trust, so does disclosure. A pause, Regina's voice cooled by half a degree. You are entering a family with a history that predates any of us. And Darius is entering a marriage with me. Of course. The words were polite. The message was not, Regina continued. I simply hope lawyers do not turn something symbolic into something adversarial. Camille looked out the window of her office. Then we agree. Regina went silent. Camille continued. Because if it's symbolic, revising unfair language should be easy. Regina ended the call 6 sentences later. Her smile was gone by the time she set down the phone. Brielle was sitting across from her in the Harrington breakfast room. She won't sign? She is having lawyers rewrite everything. Brielle stirred her coffee. If she really loved Darius, she'd sign. Regina looked at her daughter. For once, the sentence did not reassure her. It gave her an idea. The rehearsal dinner was 18 days away, 68 guests. Family, foundation donors, old friends, 2 trustees from the museum, 3 bankers, and Kang Tae-jun. Regina said nothing for a long moment. Then, she doesn't like public scenes. Brielle looked up. No, she is very controlled. Yes. Regina's eyes narrowed slightly. Brielle understood before her mother finished thinking. Give it to her at the dinner. Regina looked at her. Brielle leaned forward, not aggressively, calmly. Make it about reassurance. About family tradition. And if she refuses, then everyone finally sees why she's here. Regina studied her daughter. That should have been the moment Brielle felt ashamed. Instead, she felt useful. The feeling had been trained into her. That same week, Regina intensified another campaign. Kang Tae-jun was invited to a private dinner at the Harrington house. Brielle was told to be there at 7. She arrived at 6:58. Regina looked her over once. Not that dress. Brielle stopped. What's wrong with it? Too severe. It's a foundation dinner. It's Tae-jun. There it was. No disguise. Brielle crossed her arms. What if he isn't interested? Regina moved closer and adjusted the collar of Brielle's blouse with 2 fingers. Then make him interested. Brielle went still. Her mother's hands were gentle. The words were not. Mother, do not be childish. I'm not. Then understand the stakes. Regina lowered her voice. Darius carries this family. You protect it. The same sentence, again. Only now Brielle was old enough to hear what it really meant. Not daughter, asset, not love. Leverage. For the first time, resentment moved in 2 directions. Toward Camille, who had built enough to say no, and toward Regina, who had raised Brielle to believe no was a luxury. Dinner with Tae-jun went badly. Not because he was rude, because he was impossible to steer. Regina mentioned Lake Geneva. He changed the subject to zoning. Charles brought up family alignment. Tae-jun asked for updated debt schedules. Brielle tried charm. He was courteous, nothing more. At 9:16, Regina excused herself to take a call. Brielle and Tae-jun were briefly alone on the terrace. She looked at him. You know what she's doing? Yes. And you still come. Business requires rooms I would not choose socially. Brielle laughed once. That might be the coldest thing anyone has ever said about my family. It wasn't intended to be warm. She looked away, then asked, Would you ever marry for business? Tae-jun's expression changed almost imperceptibly. No. Why? Because business has exit clauses. Brielle looked back at him. For a moment, she hated how much she wanted him to say something softer. He did not. 3 days before the rehearsal dinner, Tae-jun's assistant placed the event guest list on his desk. He was reviewing it for less than 30 seconds when one name stopped him. Camille Monroe. He read it again. Monroe. The memory returned sharper this time. His mother standing before a mirror. A young woman kneeling at her sleeve. Tell your mother she looks beautiful. Tae-jun opened a public business profile. Monroe. 9 boutiques. Chicago, New York, Atlanta, Washington. Private company. No valuation listed. Founder, Camille Monroe. He studied the photograph. Older now, more composed, but unmistakable. The same woman. He closed the screen. He did not request a background file. Did not ask what she earned. Did not ask whom she knew. One fact was enough. 12 years ago, when Tae-jun was still a man no one needed to impress, Camille Monroe had shown kindness to his mother without knowing his name. But tomorrow night, she would sit at a table of people who believed names were everything. And Regina Harrington had already decided to put a pen in front of her. What Tae-jun did not yet know was what the paper would say. What Brielle did not yet know was what Monroe was worth. And what Camille did not yet know was that the rehearsal dinner had stopped being a celebration. It had become a trap. The waiter still had the champagne bottle tilted when Camille lowered the pen. No signature, just the soft click of metal against polished wood. For 1 second, nobody understood what had happened. Regina Harrington's expression did not change, but Brielle's did. A small smile appeared at the corner of her mouth, the kind that said she had been waiting for exactly this. Camille looked at Darius. Not at Regina. Not at Brielle. Not at the 68 guests pretending not to stare. Darius, did you know she was going to do this tonight? His eyes moved toward his mother. That was answer enough. Darius. I knew she wanted the agreement settled before the wedding. That wasn't my question. The room seemed to contract around them. Camille kept her voice low. Did you know she was going to put it in front of me here? Darius took too long. Yes, there it was. Not betrayal in some dramatic form. No affair, no hidden second family. Just a man who knew the woman he loved was about to be cornered in public and decided silence was easier. Brielle leaned back in her chair. If you're not marrying him for the Harrington name, I honestly don't understand why signing is so difficult. Camille turned toward her. The sentence was almost elegant. That made it worse. She looked back at Darius. Are you going to let them do this? Darius stood. For the first time that evening, hope moved through Camille before she could stop it. Maybe this was the moment. Maybe 2 years of loving him had not been misplaced. Darius looked at his mother. Mom, this isn't the place. Camille's hope died so quietly no one heard it. Not, don't speak to her that way. Not, she deserves respect. Not, I won't marry anyone who humiliates the woman I love. This isn't the place. He objected to the setting, not the cruelty. Regina folded her hands. If Camille has nothing to hide, there is nothing humiliating about protecting our family. Darius turned back to Camille. His voice softened. Please, just sign it. We can fix this later. Camille stared at him. Something inside her became very still. Across the room, Taejan did not move. He had seen men destroy partnerships over money. He had seen brothers become enemies over property. He knew the exact sound a relationship made when trust cracked. It was usually much quieter than people expected. Camille closed the prenup. No. Regina's brows lifted. No? No. Brielle gave a short laugh. So that's it? Camille looked at her. That's what? All this talk about independence. All the speeches about building your own life. And the second you're asked to prove you aren't here for the Harrington name, suddenly you need lawyers. A few guests shifted. Regina allowed Brielle to continue. That was the point. Brielle was saying what Regina wanted said while Regina kept her hands clean. Then Regina spoke. You have to understand, Camille, our family has standards, expectations, a level of refinement that comes with carrying this name. Camille's eyes dropped, not in shame, to Regina's dress. Deep sapphire silk, structured waist, soft shoulder construction, narrow hand-finished cuff. Camille knew every inch of it. She had rejected the first lining sample herself. Is it comfortable? Regina blinked. Excuse me? The gown. A murmur moved through the nearest table. Camille nodded toward Regina's shoulder. We changed the lining there. The original silk irritated the skin after 2 hours, especially on women over 50. Made them replace it before production. Regina's face emptied. Camille continued. Mon, oh. Fall collection. Silence. A woman seated beside Charles Harrington looked at Regina's sleeve. That's Monroe? Camille nodded. Yes. Regina glanced down at herself as though the dress had betrayed her. Camille did not smile. That was what made it worse. Brielle's mouth tightened. A dress doesn't make you part of this family. No, Camille said. It doesn't. She reached into her handbag and removed a slim document folder. Naomi had told her to carry the financial disclosure until every agreement was complete. Camille had thought it was excessive. Now she understood why lawyers survived by assuming the worst. She placed the first page on top of the closed prenup, Monroe. Monroe has 9 boutiques. Brielle's expression shifted. Chicago, New York, Atlanta, and Washington. Camille turned another page. 86 employees. Last year's revenue was $14,730,000. Someone near the far end of the table stopped whispering. Camille placed the valuation report beside it. Independent valuation? $24.8 million. The room went completely still. Even Taejan's eyes changed. He had known Monroe was successful. He had not known that number. But the number was not what held him. He was remembering a small shop 12 years earlier, his mother standing in front of a mirror. Camille on one knee with pins between her lips, refusing payment for an alteration because kindness had seemed more natural to her than leverage. The woman who had done that had built this. At the nearest table, one of Regina's oldest friends slowly lowered her fork. Another guest glanced at Brielle's clutch, then toward Camille, as if suddenly wondering how many things in the room carried her name they had dismissed. The waiter finally straightened the champagne bottle. A single drop slid down the neck and fell onto the white cloth. Nobody reached for a napkin. Camille saw it and thought, absurdly, of Ruth teaching her to cut silk without wasting an inch. Measure twice, cut once. Some decisions deserved patience. Others only required the courage to stop pretending the fabric could still be saved. This was that moment. Regina looked from the report to Camille. For the first time all evening, she had no prepared expression. Camille rested her fingers on the paper. I own 74%. Brielle recovered first. Fine. You have money. Camille looked at her. That was never the point. Then what is? Before Camille could answer, a woman 2 seats down laughed nervously. Well, Regina, perhaps you'll still get your second wedding soon. Her eyes moved toward Brielle, then Taejun. Brielle's posture stiffened. Regina smiled automatically. Let's not get ahead of ourselves. The woman continued, unaware of the damage she was doing. After Lake Geneva? Please. Half of Chicago already thinks those two are practically engaged. Camille looked at Brielle, then Regina, then Taejun. A memory clicked into place. The private dinners, the carefully arranged seating. Regina mentioning how important Kang Meridian might become to the family. Brielle suddenly appearing at every event Taejun attended. Camille understood. Slowly, completely, she turned back to Regina. I'm curious. Regina's eyes narrowed. Camille's voice stayed calm. Why am I the gold digger when I'm the only woman at this table nobody is trying to marry for money? Brielle's smile vanished. The silence afterward felt physical. Regina's chin lifted. That is an outrageous interpretation. Is it? Brielle looked at Taejun. For the first time that evening, there was something almost frightened in her face. Camille noticed. And suddenly the cruelty looked different. Not smaller, but sadder. Brielle had spent weeks helping Regina corner Camille into a financial agreement while Regina was quietly positioning her own daughter. As Camille looked back at Taejun's. Camille looked back. Taejun. Mr. Kang? He met her eyes. Has your investment in Harrington Holdings closed? Charles Harrington's hand tightened around his water glass. Regina spoke immediately. That is private. Camille did not look at her. Mr. Kang? Taejun answered. No. A ripple moved through the room. Camille asked one more question. Is there an investment? Taejun paused. He knew exactly what answering would do. He also knew she had not asked him to save her, only to tell the truth. No. Charles closed his eyes. Regina went pale. Taejun? Skis moved to her. Mr. Kang? 2 words. Nothing more. But Brielle heard the door close. Regina tried again. Our negotiations are ongoing. Taejun's voice remained even. The Harrington Group approached Kang Meridian, seeking $8.7 million in new liquidity for restructuring. No agreement has been executed. No accusation. No insult. Just fact. And facts were worse. The entire architecture of the evening collapsed at once. The family accusing Camille of wanting their wealth was actively searching for millions they did not have. Camille looked around the table. She could have humiliated them now. She could have asked about the commercial property, the trust, the art sales. She did not. Instead, she looked at Darius. His face was devastated. Camille, I didn't know the numbers were that bad. She believed him. That was almost worse. Your debt isn't why I'm leaving. Darius stood straighter. Leaving? Yes. Camille, wait. She removed her engagement ring. He stared at her hand. I love you. I know. Then don't do this because of one night. Camille's eyes filled, but her voice did not break. This isn't one night. She thought of every time Regina had cut her with a smile. Every time Brielle had erased her name, every time Darius had whispered, "Let it go. I could marry a man with nothing." She placed the ring on top of the prenup. I cannot marry a man who asks me to become nothing. Darius stopped breathing. Camille picked up her handbag. No one tried to stop her. Not Regina, not Brielle, not Charles, and not Taejun. That mattered. Balg. He watched her walk the length of the room alone because he understood something the Harringtons never had. Standing beside a powerful woman did not mean stepping in front of her. The doors opened. Camille walked through them. The doors closed behind her, and for the first time in generations, the Harrington name could not make someone stay. The room stayed silent for 11 seconds after Camille left. Regina Harrington was the first to move. She lifted her napkin, folded it once, and placed it beside her plate as though the evening had merely become inconvenient. "Perhaps," she said, "this is for the best." No one answered. Darius was still staring at the engagement ring resting on top of the prenup. Brielle stared at Taejun. Charles stared at nothing. Regina turned toward the Korean man at the next table and rebuilt her smile. "Mr. Kang, regarding Harrington Holdings, perhaps we should continue our discussion privately." Taejun set down his napkin. "You asked me to invest in the Harrington name?" Regina's expression steadied. "Yes." His eyes moved once toward Camille's empty chair. "Tonight I learned what that name is worth." Charles shifted forward. "Surely personal matters and business can remain separate." "I agree." Taejun stood. "That is why I will not marry into your family either." Brielle's face changed before Regina's did. Not because Taejun had broken her heart. He had never promised it. Because in one sentence he had named what nobody had admitted. She had been part of the deal. Regina rose halfway from her chair. No one said anything about marriage. Taejun looked at Brielle, not Regina. Exactly. Then he left. There was no shouting, no threat, no ruined property. He simply withdrew, and sometimes the most expensive consequence is a door closing quietly. The $8.7 million never arrived. Without Kang Meridian, Harrington Holdings had to restructure on harsher terms. A River North property was sold first. 6 months later, the family listed the Lake Geneva house. Several art pieces disappeared from the walls one by one, each explained publicly as a collection rotation. The foundation survived, but smaller. The Harrington name remained. The illusion around it did not. Darius waited 17 days before contacting Camille. He did not arrive with flowers. He did not kneel. He asked if she would meet him for coffee. Camille chose a quiet place near the flagship store. For 10 minutes, Darius barely touched his cup. Finally, he said, "I thought keeping peace meant keeping everyone together." Camille looked at him. "You kept peace with everyone except me." He nodded. There was no defense left. "I kept asking you to absorb the discomfort so I wouldn't have to confront it." "Yes, I loved you. I know." His eyes filled. "I still do." Camille's voice softened. "That doesn't make you ready to be my husband." Darius looked down. For the first time in their relationship, he did not ask her to reconsider. He started therapy 2 weeks later. By spring, he had stepped away from daily control of the family foundation and taken a teaching fellowship in arts administration. Camille heard about it from someone else. She was glad. She did not go back. Forgiveness, she learned, was not the same thing as reopening a door. Brielle's reckoning came faster. 3 nights after the rehearsal dinner, Regina found her standing in the library. "You embarrassed this family?" Brielle turned slowly. "I embarrassed it? You were supposed to keep Taejun engaged." The word hit differently now. Supposed to. Keep. Engaged. Brielle laughed once, but there was no humor in it. "So that was my job?" Regina's face hardened. "Do not be dramatic. Was I your daughter or your financing strategy?" Regina said nothing. That silence answered more than any argument could. 2 months later, Brielle resigned from the Harrington Foundation. She did not call Camille. Instead, a courier arrived at Monroe carrying 4 garment bags, 2 handbags, and every unreleased sample Brielle had borrowed. Inside one bag was a handwritten note. I should have said your name when people asked what I was wearing. Camille read it twice. She did not reply, but she placed the note inside the top drawer of her desk. The consequences were not instant, and that mattered. Harrington Holdings did not collapse overnight. It spent 9 months renegotiating debt, cutting spending, and selling assets at prices lower than Regina once believed acceptable. Employees kept their jobs. The foundation reduced grants instead of disappearing. Camille never celebrated any of it. She had wanted distance, not destruction. Munro changed too. Camille approved the 10th boutique only after making one rule for herself. She would never again describe the company as a few shops to make anyone comfortable. At the opening, she thanked Ruth by name before thanking investors, designers, or press. Taejun stood near the back and applauded once everyone else did. He did not step into the photographs. Later, Camille found him by the fitting rooms. You could have stood beside me. You did not need me beside you to make the moment yours. That answer stayed with her. Regina changed less. Some people do. Some people do not. When the Harrington estate was finally sold, she moved into a smaller townhouse near Hyde Park. What? Alec. One afternoon, while unpacking, she found the sapphire Monroe gown from the rehearsal dinner. She held it by the shoulders. Her thumb moved over the softer lining Camille had ordered changed for women like her. Regina stood there for a long time. Then she hung the dress in the new closet. She did not throw it away. 5 months after the wedding that never happened, Camille stood inside the Monroe flagship before sunrise. Racks of navy, cream, charcoal burgundy, and soft green suits filled the room. A sign near the entrance read, Second Beginnings. The program provided interview clothing, tailoring, and career workshops for women over 40. Returning to work after divorce, widowhood, caregiving, or financial hardship. Camille had wanted to build it for years. Now she finally had. Bet. At 9:18 a.m., she was kneeling in front of a 56-year-old woman named Denise, adjusting the cuff of a gray blazer. I haven't interviewed since 2004, Denise whispered. Camille pinned the sleeve. Then they're lucky you showed up. Denise smiled at herself in the mirror. Her shoulders moved back. Camille saw Ruth in that movement. Then the atmosphere near the entrance shifted. People did not go silent completely. They simply became aware. Kong Taejun walked in. Dark suit. No entourage beside him. One assistant remained near the door. Camille stood. You're early. So are you. I work here. I was told this begins at 10. It does. Then I am early. Camille almost smiled. What are you doing here? Taejun glanced toward the second beginning sign. My mother's foundation funded the program that used to occupy this building before Monroe bought it. Camille's expression changed. You knew about this work for years. She had assumed he had come because of her. She was strangely relieved to be wrong. After the event, Taejun waited until the last participant left. Then he placed a small photograph on Camille's desk. A Korean woman in her 50s stood beside a much younger Taejun. She wore a charcoal suit. Camille stared. Her fingers moved toward the photograph but stopped before touching it. I know that sleeve. Taejun nodded. I thought you might. Camille looked closer. I altered this. I know. Her eyes lifted. You remembered me? I remembered what you did. He was quiet for a moment. My mother died 11 weeks later. Camille's face softened. Taejun looked down at the photograph. It was the last picture we took together for once. Camille had nothing polished to say. So she told the truth. I'm glad she felt beautiful. She did. That was where their story actually began. Not at the rehearsal dinner. Not with $8.7 million buzzers. Not with a $24.8 million valuation. With a photograph. Since over the next 6 months, they met without arranging to become important to each other. A charity board dinner. Coffee after a second beginnings workshop. A late meal after Camille returned from New York. Taejun never offered to buy Monroe again. He never tried to solve problems she had not given him. When he offered help, he waited for an answer. Camille noticed. So did he. She began telling him that she normally edited out. The fear behind expansion. The loneliness after Ruth died. The humiliating truth that part of her had stayed with Darius. Because being accepted by the Harringtons felt like proof she had finally arrived somewhere respectable. Tae-jun listened. He did not correct her. That mattered. 11 months after the rehearsal dinner, they sat across from each other in a quiet restaurant after closing. No business folders, no family, no negotiation. Tae-jun looked at her. Is this finally a date? Camille lifted her wine. Maybe. You made me wait 11 months for maybe. You survived. A smile appeared. Small. Real. Camille smiled back. 3 months later, Tae-jun visited the flagship after hours. He wandered into Camille's office and stopped at the wooden shelf beside the window. Ruth's old dressmaking scissors rested there. Were those hers? Camille nodded. He did not ask what the company was worth now. He did not ask about the 10th store. He asked, "What did she teach you first?" Camille looked at the scissors. How to make a woman stand taller without changing who she was. Tae-jun looked at her. But she taught you well. For years, Camille had helped women stand taller while quietly making herself smaller for the people she loved. She did not do that anymore. Not for a surname, not for a marriage, not even for a powerful man. And Tae-jun never asked her to. That was the difference. If Kapilza's story stayed with you, tell me in the comments. Would you have signed that prenup to save the wedding? Or walked away? And if you believe love should never require you to shrink yourself, subscribe and stay with us for the next story.